I'm going to share my story with anxiety, depression, crazy medication experiences, and a fun trip to the hospital. I'm not trying to upset anybody with the information I'm about to tell you. This is my personal experience. We all have our own experiences and we all have different ways of dealing with them. I use humor, and sometimes my humor can be very dark and enjoy. 12, 15 years ago. Originally, I was an actor. I went to school for comedy and acting. And then I decided to become a funeral director because you can really see the parallel there. It was also quite depressing. After quite a while, I developed severe depression. I always had depression and anxiety when I was younger. Some of the big reasons I was an anxious teen: one, trigger warning, talking about the R word. So I didn't have a choice when it came to losing my virginity. That really messed me up. And then I had another horrible experience a few years later. It kind of scarred me and made relationships more difficult in my life. And I experienced carbon monoxide poisoning, not at my own hands. I had 3 gas leaks in my crappy apartment. Yeah, I think I was 18. There's a video on that where I actually turned that experience into a song because I thought it would be therapeutic. I was really triggered when I was in that industry. I was about 19 when I was in school, and I think 20 as a fully licensed funeral director. So I was a little bit young, I think. And it's not the cheeriest of jobs, I must say. So after a while, I think I started drinking quite a bit. Yeah, way to kind of numb everything. Yeah, I wasn't very happy with my life. So after a while, I decided, hey, let's take nursing. Let's try and help people. I did not enjoy nursing. And that's when I realized that the living terrify me more than the dead. So that wasn't for me. And that's when I went to go see my family doctor. I lived in a really small town at that point. And he prescribed me with an antidepressant and an anti-anxiety medication. They really weren't supposed to be mixed together. And to my parents' credit, they tried to find me like psychotherapists and people to chat with, but it just ended up being a really big bill. And I didn't find myself getting a whole lot of help from that. There weren't enough people to talk with, basically. I'd like to say I don't discondone medication use. It can be very, very helpful. The story I'm about to tell you is my personal experience and how it wasn't the best choice for me. You'll understand why later. So depressed, like I would have drank anything or like taken whatever you had given me. Like I was that low. I was prescribed those 2 medications, and really I just needed to talk to someone. Yeah, some days I was taking like a lot of the anti-anxiety ones, and again, not feeling anything. It was more like it felt good to be able to take something. Anyway, fast forward like a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks down the road, they started to kick in, and like I started to feel really weird. Like I felt high. That's what it was. So I ended up going to Mexico for this family thing. Tons of booze and pot, and I was up for a good like 3-4 days. And the plane ride home, I started to see shit. Like it was really freaky. I still had that like awkward high feeling. I just wasn't acting like myself. So I think those anti-anxiety pills all kicked in at once. And I was getting like this huge dose of medication and mixing it with alcohol and pills and weed and like just anything. I don't do that now. I smoke a little pot, but I'm happy and healthy. Yay. So anyways, I came back from Mexico, and that's when things got really weird. I ended up going to, I think Windsor. Thinking about this is really strange. I still had this weird high feeling, but I started to lose touch with reality. And by the time I got home, my parents, they were selling the house, so they were packing up all their stuff. I got in and I couldn't find some of my things. I got really, really upset, and we have a banister, and I kicked one of the legs of the banister out, and that freaked out my mom. And I had been freaking people out. Just, my personality is pretty constant. It doesn't change, but I was like someone else. I was so paranoid as well. So the cops were called, and I was like 110 pounds maybe, and they had to use the taser on me. Yeah, apparently this medication makes you like a fucking superhero. Yay, I could have been a crime fighter. They got me on the ground, and then they put handcuffs on my hands and the leg ones. It wasn't under arrest. I didn't realize like they were probably going to take me to the hospital. A little cuckoo. But at the time I was just so out of it. I'm like, oh no, I'm going to jail. I don't know what I did, but because I was paranoid. And I live in a small town, like really small. I imagine my neighbors were just sitting there like with their popcorn. En route to where I think is the police station, I was talking with the cops, and we drive past the police station. I'm like, dudes, where are you going like this? And I thought they were going crazy. That was another thing of this weird, like, paranoia. I thought that people were assuming things of me, and I thought that I had to like tell people to go places because they didn't know like where they were, or like when in all reality, I didn't know where the fuck I was, and I didn't know what the fuck was going on. But my brain was just playing tricks on me. So, anywho, we arrive at the hospital. Bet you didn't see that one coming, huh? They put me in this room, and mind you, like, I'd been drinking tons, and I was smoking tons of cigarettes, and just living the good life, right? And taking those pills with booze. Yeah, cheers. I was in this room, and all I wanted to do was have a cigarette. They kept me in there for like, I don't know, 12 hours or more. And then I started to get angry after like 15 hours because I really wanted a cigarette, and my body was going through withdrawals. So I was not a happy camper at this point. They should have given me one of those nicotine patches, because I was telling them I wanted a cigarette, and they are a hospital, and they have access to that stuff, so that should have been provided, and it would have prevented a lot of distress on my part. It gets a little more distressing. Trigger warning if I'm triggered by like hospital experiences. So I stayed overnight, and I was talking to this other guy, and we both thought that we were like talking to someone together. Yeah. Anyways, the next day they took me into the fun psych ward. It was not a happy place to be, and they grouped everybody together. So I was there with people that had just gotten out of like prison. There was not a lot of good care. It was even really hard to find therapists where I was. Yeah. So anyways, I still haven't had a nicotine patch, and I really, really want a cigarette. I'm pretty upset. They've taken me into this like hallway with a bunch of doors. I have no idea what's going on, and like that medication is still like in my system. So even though I wasn't like drinking or doing anything else, I was still messed up from like the plethora of pills that I had been taking. It took them a little bit of a struggle. This is what I thought was unnecessary. They come into the room and they took my clothes off. Well, not like they didn't take them, they took them off. And they put on a gown, like me on the bed. And no, I wasn't like a willing participant of this, but at the same time, they did not need 10 people for someone who was like 100, 110 pounds. It's very, very traumatic. And it just made me more angry. So, and I found a dime like on the floor, and I ended up unscrewing the bed. And after about 15 minutes, half an hour, I had the entire one side of the bed off. I had me in restraints, like the arm and the leg restraints. And how the hell did I manage to do that? Oh, I have really tiny wrists, so I got myself out, and that's how I just placed it beside the bed. Because I was pissed. It's like, took my clothes, that wasn't necessary, dudettes. They were not happy about that, and they gave me more medication. So I went cold turkey off of the medication I was on previously, and they put me on an antipsychotic. So they diagnosed me with bipolar based on my perceived manic state, which I was fine with. I'm like, all right, let's learn about this, and this is my life now. I still didn't believe it. I really fought against that diagnosis. And this might be too much information, but I was very hormonal. And I get extreme PMS. It's like the crazies. Not that bad, not like how I was acting in the hospital, but it amplified that. It can be very serious. So coupled with no smoking, being in a strange place, just feeling off my rocker, I was also experiencing extreme PMS. Put me on an antipsychotic. Yeah. And it just made me feel like a zombie. Don't do drugs, and be careful when they're prescribed. I'm disappointed in the healthcare system because when I was released, I wasn't given any discharge plan. I wasn't given therapy. They were just kind of like, oh, hey, here's a bag of pills on the house, and have fun. What? Wish you well. Things are a lot different now. There are programs and people to talk to, which probably could have prevented this whole thing if I had like a decent therapist. And to the credit of my family doctor, they just, like, small towns, they don't have enough doctors that have enough training or to really help people with depression and anxiety. But there were some really interesting things that happened during my stay. Whatever my family doctor gave me, even though the combination wasn't so great for my brain, yeah, it came up with some really interesting things. I came up with this really creative idea for an outfit. Long story short, it ended up being like this really cute skirt. I even like ripped it so it had ties, and like that was really creative. Kind of impressed now that I think about it. And the shirt I fashioned into a tube top.
The future of fashion.
These pills made me really creative, and I was very impressed about my outfit. The nurses were not. They were trying to be nice about it too, because I probably looked like a Looney Tune. Anyway, I'm thinking of all the different things that happened in there. I feel that my treatment at that hospital was very unfair. It was very unsupervised, it was unsafe. It did nothing for me. In fact, I feel that it took away from my health and my well-being. Not so fun. So for the rest of my life, I'm gonna be real fucking weird. hardest part, so this is hard. This is hard. Unfortunately, I was misdiagnosed, and I lived with this diagnosis for like 12, 13 years, or 12 years. Last year, my doctor revoked it, and she said it's called medication-induced psychosis. Once I was off the medication, I went back to normal. But unfortunately, when I was diagnosed, the doctors told me, even if I don't exhibit any signs, which would be like highs and lows, which I had never experienced in my entire life. I just had that one high, weird experience from the medication. I had to wait 10 years for nothing to happen. He said, if nothing happens in 10 years, sorry, that's my dog, then the diagnosis is thrown away. But that was just how they worked. I'm not sure if they still work that way. So for that amount of time, I learned everything about that diagnosis. So anyways, I was in the hospital for a couple months. And it was really tough. I lost friends and a lot of relationships. I gained a shit ton of weight too. I gained like 70 pounds. They had me on this really, really heavy duty medication. And then I had to pay for it when I was out. It was really expensive. So the medication they gave me ended up causing extreme depression. And I felt like I was living this lie because the diagnosis I was given, being bipolar, it just didn't feel right. The medication that the doctors prescribed me with afterwards, which was ended up having an adverse effect again. It resulted in extreme depression, and when self-harmed, and when I had very, very dark thoughts and acted on those dark thoughts, it was when I was on that medication. I've had experiences with depression and anxiety the past year or so, just due to life and circumstances, but nothing nearly as intense as I used to experience. My mood was just, I just felt devastated all the time. And I did not want to be here anymore. So eventually I weaned myself off the medication. Pretty much had to beg to do that. Like, I really don't want to be on this stuff anymore. Like, oh no, if you stop taking it, something might happen. Meaning I'd have the same sort of episode. So I did not. I ended up feeling much happier. I didn't want to drink anymore. I didn't want to smoke tons of pot. I was more social, and I wished that I had gotten off of that medication sooner. My mood continued to get better and better. I started working with a mental health organization and helping other people, and I was wearing my bipolar diagnosis proudly, even though it was fake. And I really enjoyed life again. I started using comedy again as a tool to tell my story, and I would speak at seminars and try and inform the public about anxiety, depression, the crazies, inform people, make them laugh, and hopefully reduce stigma. I felt like I was living this lie because the diagnosis I was given, being bipolar, it just didn't feel right until it was revoked. And I was always just waiting for that messed up thing to happen again. Even though I knew in the back of my mind it was due to all the other circumstances. Put anybody in that situation where you're taking 2 opposing medications, and a ton of them, drinking, not getting sleep, not eating properly. That is the perfect storm for going nutso. So do not write that recipe down. I learned so much about this. I ended up going to tons of support groups, and all the while, I knew that it wasn't going to happen again. because it had never happened until I took that medication. So fast forward, so it's now 12, 13 years later. I have no diagnosis. I've just got mild depression from time to time, but you know, nothing serious. It used to be really serious. Yeah, I had to wait that amount of time, all the while just like waiting for something to happen. It was really stressful. For such a long time, I was afraid to be myself. I was afraid to be my goofy, weird, quirky self, because I thought, oh no, people are gonna think I'm crazy. People are gonna think I'm too happy. And that's depressing. Not being yourself and just hiding, not so fun. During that time, I felt so stigmatized. If you tell someone, you're depressed, they're like, oh, you seem to have a little more empathy. If you tell someone you're bipolar, they're like, you get like I was just listening to everything these doctors said. And some of them were good. But going back to what I said before, all I needed was someone to talk to initially. I went back to acting, and I've been loving it ever since. I do a little bit of contortion too. It does feel as though I'm living my life for the first time again, because 12 years is a really long time to have stolen from you. And that's how I see it, because I was living this false life. And it turns out I'm just a little anxious, and sometimes I get a little sad. Big fucking deal. So for the rest of my life, I'm gonna be real fucking weird. I still do deal with depression. Sometimes it can get very heavy, depending on what time of the month it is. But I've learned effective coping mechanisms. If I'm feeling depressed, I have a list of 20 things that I can do to help me curb that depression and to turn that depression into feeling happy again. But that's taken years, learning to meditate, learning, cognitive behavioral therapy. Doing those things, that's the hardest part. You can learn all the stuff and be like, yeah, I'm gonna do it, but actually sitting down and putting that into practice, it takes work. And yes, it was very difficult for me to get to where I am, but I'm happy. And even though that experience was pretty horrible, it's made me the person I am today. And I think that's why I'm always kind, no matter what circumstance someone's in. And I always want to help. If anybody wants to share their story, or if you have questions, be happy to chat or read anything that you want to say. I hope you got something out of this if you made it this far, and stay tuned for the next video